UFO Round Table. The UFO Thinker and Pursuit of the Paranormal podcasts.
Okay, so welcome back to the monthly Roundup Round Table / festive edition, end of year edition type thing with myself, Frank, UFO Thinker podcast, part of the Colin Albion's Cab Network. We also have Ash from Pursuit of the Paranormal podcast and UFO Identified UK, the UK's premier UFO group. How are you doing, Ash?
That's the one. That's the one. I'm good. Merry Christmas, Frank. How you had a good Christmas?
Very good, thanks. Very, very hectic indeed in my household, with little ones running around screaming and climbing up the Christmas tree and doing all kinds of craziness. But all in all, very good indeed. And we also have the ghost of UFOs present himself, the crypto enthusiast and font of UFO knowledge, the inimitable Dave Smethurst. How you doing, mate?
Inimitable. I love that, Frank. Yeah, I'm doing great, mate. I had a nice Christmas, nice chilled Christmas. Watched that film with Julia Roberts in it last night. Oh, it's on. I can't remember what it's called. Like
Leave the World Behind.
Yeah, it's absolutely excellent. I recommend everybody watch it. It's really good. It's like a sort of apocalypse sort of starting thing. Very interesting. So I watched that last night. It was very good. But yeah, I had a really nice Christmas, nice and chilled, family round, just talking, really good. And I had a drink, which I don't normally do. Not much, but for me, it was quite a bit. So yeah, great. And you two guys sound like you've had a decent one.
Yeah, not bad. I'll tell you what, Dave, it's a bit of a weird synchronicity. I myself also had a drink last night, and I watched the same film last night as well. So there we go. And I found it very good, very enjoyable, probably partly as a result of the beverage, which I consumed. But yeah, very good. I had an old-fashioned cocktail. I don't know if you've ever tried one of those, but it's become a bit of a festive beverage of choice over the last few years. What were you on, Dave?
I had Jack Daniels and Coke and a Peroni. I was Don Peroni.
Excellent. Sounds good. Well, you can't see right now because my camera's not working. The listeners won't be able to see anyway, but I'm currently drinking a bottle of Corona. So keeping the festive vibes going.
Oh dear. I hope you'd be all right to produce the show, Frank. I don't know if I like the sound of that.
Well, it's the one and only Corona of the evening so far, so I think we'll be all right. But we'll see how the evening
professionals there, boy, professionals.
Yeah, right.
I was showing you this wine before.
Oh no! Look at this. What's this here then?
Oh, very nice. Pappy.
It's a famille pairing. It's called Close Encounters Chateauneuf du Pape.
Very nice.
It's a French wine. I don't drink wine. I just have it just on my display. But it's based around an actual bylaw in the region of France in 1954. The mayor actually made it a law that UFOs weren't allowed to land in the vineyards.
Right.
And it's an actual law in France.
Wow.
Bylaw.
That's brilliant, Ash.
And no one's ever broken that law, so it's been working.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's still a law today.
Chateauneuf du Pape, very nice.
Oh, excellent. Well, there we go. We've all learned something there this evening. What's it called again? The place where they have that law? Is it a specific town?
The vineyards of Chateauneuf du Pape.
Oh, so it's the entire area then, sort of
right.
thing. Well, I'll have to put it on my list of places to visit then, and we'll see what the situation is down there.
It's got a nice UFO on the label, shooting.
Very good.
Well, one to check out. So, obviously, for this episode, as we did with last year's one, I thought we could go back and think about some of the big events of the year 2023 and look ahead to see what we think might happen in 2024. And obviously, for this one, for 2023, it's fair to say that a lot's happened this year. I actually went back earlier on and had listened to last year's episode. I just kind of skimmed through and reminded myself what we were talking about. And it's quite interesting, really, listening back to it. First of all, it's flown by this year. But remembering kind of the speculation of what may be to come, and certain things were pretty accurate in what we were talking about. Funnily enough, there was also the discussion of the Wisconsin lights this time last year, which was, there was a UFO case and all the rest of it that was kind of getting a lot of traction online, people discussing it. And I think it's safe to say that it essentially ended up being most likely to be somebody's really intense Christmas lights display. It's pretty funny when you look back on it. I don't think that case really stood the test of time as one of the greats, but, it's always interesting to look into these things. But that one, yeah, particularly funny with it being a Christmas, Christmas lights display at this time of year. But one of the really big things that which we were mentioning on that show almost exactly a year ago was, the talk of rumours of somebody with a big story looking to come forward in the coming months, as we said at the time. And I think it's definitely safe to say that one really did come to fruition. Dave Grusch stepped forward, and as we now know, various people who knew Dave Grusch before he went public obviously have been discussing the possibility of him coming forward and whatnot, and some of that kind of word spread. And it was one of those scenarios where the word on the grapevine, proved accurate in this particular case. In some ways, part of the problem was that the grapevine actually gave away a little bit too much, and there's been discussion about how some of the information kind of came out before Grusch stepped forward, and it kind of actually put a little bit of pressure on Grusch to come forward quicker and in perhaps a different way to what he'd originally planned. But I think the main point on this is that Grusch, did indeed come forward, someone with that verifiable, glowing record of military service and a long-term intelligence officer whose actual job it was to investigate what was really going on with UFOs from the inside, with that high-level clearance and access and whatnot. Basically acting on behalf of the people to satisfy the curiosity and the demand for answers to those questions with the backing of Congress. And that's what Dave Grusch was doing. It's fascinating, isn't it, when you actually think about it, especially now, a little bit down the line from when he first came out. I think, that is basically, the individual who came forward to basically the world's public, specifically to the American people, but obviously the shockwaves kind of went around the world, to say that his, several year investigation, having interviewed over 40 background checked individuals, all pointed to one conclusion, that the US government is in possession of, as he says, double digit numbers of non-human craft, technology, including partially intact and fully intact craft of non-human origin. And in addition to that, some of these craft had pilots, biologics, as he refers to them, and Grusch has brought individuals to actually brief Congress people about their involvement in that biological analysis of the biological material. And also the details of the secrecy around these programs, set up to store the material and reverse engineer whatever this technology is, including the illegal funding structures and avoidance, or alleged avoidance, of the proper oversight, and an astonishing, really, amount of reprisals against anybody who dares to speak out, including intimidation, harassment, and even murders alleged to have taken place to maintain secrecy on this issue. Obviously, a lot of which was already kind of in the UFO law, but it's really been fascinating to see this sort of confirmed essentially by somebody who's been in Grusch's position. So since then, we've had Grusch on major news channels, in newspapers across the world, and even recently on Joe Rogan, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, podcast in the world. Doesn't get much bigger than that, really, does it? Sort of thinking about it and what's actually played out, it's been pretty wild to see how all that's unfolded. So what do you reckon about Grusch coming forward, Dave, on balance, now we look back on it and the impact that's had?
Yeah, I mean, that was the real game changer for me. I mean, we started off with a bang, didn't we, with Balloon Gate, and that sort of set the ball rolling, really. It was almost, no, it wasn't orchestrated, but it sort of set the scene and catapulted onto the news line. Then we had Kirkpatrick coming out and trying to roll it back a bit, and then Grusch come out, and it all changed for me. I thought it was massive. I think I said at the time he sort of collapsed the sort of quantum wave, where that idea of the quantum wave being collapsed, whereby you observe an object and you see it and it comes into being. Bit like that for ufology, and but there was loads of different possibilities out there. It could be, and then he come along and he really confirmed sort of loads of stuff, and that was the thing for me. It was a massive step change. It really changed everything, and we've got this pretty. I know we haven't got total, but we've got pretty high certainty given on the level of the corroboration from the ICIG, Intelligence Community Inspector General, on what's been going on with the UAP secrecy. And so I think there's a bit of it's put a bit of a challenge down to the community, the UAP community, and maybe who's commentating, to get off the fence a little bit. I'm not saying people should get off the fence, but it's where our analysis goes. Should we focus more on these things? Because he effectively confirmed a lot of what we thought. And I also think we maybe should have listened, and it told me we should listen a bit more, given the corroboration of people who had a certain profile. They were credible. They weren't looking for publicity, but they worked on programs. They were telling us things, and they'd been dismissed, really. But I think we were wrong to dismiss that many people, really. And I think that's another thing for me. There's a bit of a profile there. So I thought it was fantastic. I thought he'd come forward. It really changed the game, and I think he's put it on us, and we've got more to go at. But it come at a high point in July with the public hearings, and after that, clearly the brakes had gone on. It was interesting, Frank. You were saying to me, I think you were proved right, but you were worried about there being a bit of a reaction and not everything being glistening is not gold, as it were. And I think it started then. The press was shut down very quietly. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and they waited very patiently, even though they got a few knocks, the forces of non-disclosure, and they gutted the thing in the reconciliation stage of the bill. So the fight back's on, really, and I thought it was so significant, Grusch. The hearings were absolutely credible. We should probably come back to those hearings, but yeah. I think we've also got to realise that not passing the act was a big setback for us. I think a lot of people have tried to jolly it along, and I think it's good and it's got something on the statute books, but it is a big setback, and we need to recognise it. Now I think there will be other things which we'll get onto, but yeah, I think we need to. I think the future was fairly certain last year when we were looking at it because we'd had a lot of leaks. Now going into this year, it's not so certain, but Grusch has totally changed the game for me and how we should look at the subject. Certainly for me anyway. So yeah, massive.
Yeah, definitely. I remember it was George Knapp talking about the fight back and the closer, what was it that he said? The closer you get to the secrets, the more the pushback's going to be. Something along those lines.
Over the target, yeah, you're over the target area, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that we've definitely seen an increase in that kind of pushback. But yeah, just a crazy thing to happen. I mean, I sort of had pretty strong indications when we talked about it last year on the round table that it was going to happen, but I don't think I even anticipated something on this scale. Dave Grusch on Joe Rogan was a pretty mind-blowing, I think, in terms of we're not seeing the impact of that yet, I don't think, but like the mainstream news hasn't really picked up on it as much as I thought maybe they would do when I first saw Grusch coming forward. Don't get me wrong, he's been on news and stuff like that, but you'd think it'd be like the main story on every online news website and the front page of every paper. Maybe that's my bias because I'm so interested in this topic, but I don't know. It seems like it should have been a bigger impact in terms of mainstream media, but there's no questioning that the impact that Joe Rogan's podcast is going to have, like the 10, 20 million people that listen to that, and I don't think we've really seen the knock-on effect of that in terms of, people getting interested who perhaps weren't before, because there will have been a lot of Congress people listening to that podcast and, thinking, oh, let's go on, let's see what's actually happening with this guy then, and let's give him a fair crack of the whip kind of thing. And some of them might not be convinced, but some may be, and that may well inspire them to really, push for transparency with whatever tools they have available to them. So I think that'll be something we'll see continuing to develop. as time goes along. It's like, I remember getting into this topic, a lot of it for me was the New York Times article and, Lou Elizondo coming forward and what TTSA were doing. And that kind of really inspired me to get involved. And a lot of other people who I speak to now, researchers and stuff like that. And I think Joe Rogan and Grusch coming forward in general and Grusch going on Joe Rogan, I think it'll inspire a whole new wave, of interest in that area. What do you reckon, Ash?
Yeah, I mean, the Grusch story, undeniably the biggest kind of event of the year. I was skeptical at first, but going back to what Dave was talking about, the hearings, and that was just, for me, like a few hours of the best TV I've seen all year, watching that unfold live, better than any sports show or live sports or anything. It was just incredible. I was rooting, I was cheering, I was punching the air at some of the replies that Grusch was giving. And as, like I said, I was skeptical at first, but seeing him in that sort of setting was just amazing. And you mentioned the media kind of hasn't picked up on it much. And yeah, I agree, because go back to the shoot downs in February, that was all over, and it seemed to continue for quite a bit afterwards. Whereas with this, it was in the papers kind of immediately afterwards. But since then, it has been quiet. And we monitor UFO Identified, all the news in the UK, what's been reported, any sort of UFO stories, anything like that. And it has been quiet, which is a bit sad, a bit of a shame. I think with that, like you say, it should be front page stuff, what he's talking about. Whereas with the shoot downs, that kind of was, and a lot of people, more people seem to be aware of the shoot downs at the Alaska and the other balloons than you are of Grusch. And whether that's just because it's more in your face, got pictures and stuff like that, rather than a guy sat in a courtroom. Maybe that's why. It's just not as exciting to hear someone talk, rather than talking about military shooting something out of the sky. It's just more exotic or something for the mainstream. But it is, it's just a bit of a shame that it hasn't kind of kept up the sort of media flurry that we saw initially, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, it's a good point that, comparing the impact that it had in terms of the mainstream news. The balloons undoubtedly was everywhere, wasn't it? Like that was what I would have expected, like you say, the Grusch thing to have been. But perhaps that's what it is. Perhaps it's the kind of first of all, the immediacy of it. Like, hang on, there's something we don't know what it is, and it's floating right over over a certain city, whatever city it was. I can't remember now off the top of my head. And there was pictures of it that people were taking and posting to social media. And obviously the actual shoot down itself, there was a video of that, wasn't there? Sort of thing. You could see the jet coming in. I don't know. I've often dismissed photographs and video because it's too difficult to verify anything. But perhaps that actually speaks to how important a significant photograph or a video could be, because that may be the difference there. Like Grusch, I've kind of talked about the hearing as Godfather Part 3, where it's a lot of courtroom action. You know what I mean? You don't quite get the action that you get in Godfather Parts 1 and 2. I don't know if you've seen the Godfather movies, Ash, but, no. Take it from me. The first two are a bit more action-packed, and the third one's a lot of courtroom drama, and it's about 3 hours long. Right. So if you're really into The Godfather, you're probably going to really enjoy the Godfather Part 3. But if you're not...
I like John Grisham books, so that's...
Yeah. Hey, I'll tell you what, it's worth having a watch if you've not seen the Godfather movies, just on a tangent. If you've got a bit of time over the holidays.
On the Presto, when I did the research for what I was doing for the Ghost of Christmas Present stuff, I looked at it, and what happened was Balloongate kicked it off, and then there was quite a few things written about it. Grusch come out. There was quite a lot of interest in Grusch, and there's quite a lot of articles there. Then the Axe come out, and there was quite a lot of interest there. You had stuff in the Guardian and all the rest of it, and then after the hearings, I think something changed, and the decision was made, I think, whoever these people are, to shut it down, and it all stopped. The Senate hearings stopped, but the press coverage stopped dead. You know, I think in the Church Commission, where they had a lot of control over editors, owners, and all the rest of it. And when I looked at it again, preparing for this and thinking about it, I think there's definitely a lot of influence sort of used. I mean, I know it sounds very conspiratorial, but there was definitely a push to shut it down. So for me, it was a bit of a year of sort of two halves. Up to July, it was great, and then it was shut down. And I think that indicates that they've realised they sort of know where to go, but they're going for it. The other side of it, and interestingly, coming back to that picture, is like we were talking about last time. I think provenance is important. Picture on its own won't do anything, but if it's verified by the government or whoever, who people are aware, then it does become important. But I think what's come clear to me this year, and we've talked about it before on the pod and everything, I think people will really have to be convinced, because I think in the back of their mind, a lot of them think it is true, but they don't want to acknowledge it. I think people are more aware of it now. You think about acknowledging it, and I think we're going to have to virtually, or metaphorically, grab them by the scruff of the neck, make them look at a picture and give them incontrovertible proof, because people don't want to believe it, and I think that's a factor. So there's two things in play there, and I think the people, the agencies who are trying to suppress it know that, because it's one thing having interest in UFOs in the sky and it's all a bit of a mystery, but when it's becoming real like it is now, people won't want to buy into that because it's so shocking. And I think that's a fact. I may be over-egging it a bit. So I noticed those two things this year, that definitely a lot of press control being exerted, which I wasn't sure about before. And the fact that people will have to be properly convinced because of that factor. And we talked about it, the will to be ignorant, we called it, Frank, in a pod about a year ago or so. And it's that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's been a bit of an eye opener in terms of, as you say, it sort of sounds a bit conspiratorial, and I really try and avoid anything unnecessarily conspiratorial. But as we know, conspiracies are a thing, and organisations and groups do conspire to do certain things, and they have done in history, and that's been proven. But in this case, it does seem striking, the kind of coordinated nature of the way that certain articles have come out at certain times and things like that. And obviously, to shape narratives, as we've mentioned on the podcast before, every time Arrow are going to put a report out, they preempt it with a TV interview and that kind of thing. I think at the very least, it's pretty clear that there's a direct attempt to shape that narrative. And to what extent that actually goes into is I suppose debatable, but I think it's clearer than ever now that there's definitely that manipulation of information going on to sort of present a narrative a certain way, which is, I suppose we've kind of suspected that, but it's become a bit more in sharp focus, recently. But yeah, what do you reckon, Ash? Anything further to add on all of
that? Just like it seems to have been, like, as well as the media, the whole kind of topic seems to have been a bit quiet lately. Obviously, the kind of the amendment got shut down. Or whether it's just because we've been spoiled over recent years, where there always seems to be a lot of stuff happening. Whereas recently, the last few months, just seems to just be quiet in general. Like, we've sort of not really seen any videos that released or new names or anything. Whether it's just because, like, whether it's been shut down or whether we've just been spoiled in recent years, it just seemed like we're due something different or something new, just because there hasn't been anything really, like, for the past few months. If that's just me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it feels to me like I don't know. I mean, it's just my perception of it, but I think the nature of the pushback and the nature of that legislation being sliced to pieces has perhaps been a bit, unexpected. The extent of it. A pushback was expected. Like all the various kind of ex-insiders, your disclosure advocates like Lou Elizondo and whatnot have talked about how, there's always a plan B and a plan C. But, I think this has got to be, perhaps unexpected. The extent of it is perhaps unexpected, even for those folks that would have expected that pushback, because it seemed pretty bold, really. A real game-changing piece of legislation put forward like this, and then for it to get all the way through with virtually no barriers, and then right at the last minute it gets shut down. And obviously, as we know, we've discussed quite a bit, the key individuals who were responsible for shutting it down also, coincidentally, just also happen to be the ones who were getting the largest amounts of funding from defence contractors. I've kind of seen it as just like that pushback was so strong that the various kind of stakeholders, if you will, who are playing a part in the transparency efforts, kind of just regrouping a little bit and figuring out what to do, to go forward. Are we going to go with Plan C, Plan B, that kind of thing? And the people who that we keep hearing about who are going to come forward with more information about a lot of this, perhaps even with direct involvement and all the rest of it, or whatever it might be, I think are probably just considering what the best path forward is. It's like Grusch, for example. Grusch is, the things that he's talked about, I feel like it doesn't get discussed enough, really. We're talking about somebody who's said that he's in fear for his life. He said that very clearly. It's terrifying, isn't it, to think, like, 1 minute you've got a very, good job, with excellent pension, all the rest of it, doing well in life, you know what I mean? And then the next minute you're not in that job anymore and you're fearing for your life because of the reprisals of what you tried to bring forward to the public. It's, and he doesn't seem like the type of guy who would be, going over the top about that. So anybody who's considering coming forward maybe is having to rethink, not perhaps rethink whether they're going to come forward or not at all, but just you'd have to put extra precautions and stuff in place, wouldn't you, if you were hearing things like what's happened to Grusch? And
I think if you think about it, Kirkpatrick overplayed his hand at those hearings, and that really irritated a lot of people. And I think that brought forward Grusch coming forward, as it were. I think he was going to come forward a bit later in the year, and he come forward, and that really shocked him. So they're a bit like somebody in the ring, in a boxing ring. They're on the ropes for a bit, and they kept getting. And the culmination for me was the hearings. The acts, then the hearings. It was one thing after another. As I say, they slowly come back, but we could see this sort of shadow war after that. This hidden conflict we always talk about, because it's a bit tit for tat. One side would do one thing, and then another would do another. Kirkpatrick did a rubbish report, and then so they said he'd been advised by legacy program people. Chris Sharp got that article about all these contracts of interest they've all got in the Department of Defence, and how they've all been the people charged with rooting out these programs have actually been overseeing them for years, and all the rest of it. Then we got Lakatsky coming out about that craft revelations. They actually had one, and they've been inside one. Crazy stuff. And then the one, just as it was being gutted, that one about the CIA having that OGA crash retrieval program, where they were going around picking craft up from around the world and giving it straight to private aerospace, which I believe from Chris, that's pretty near the main core program. So, what I'm saying is they come out as tit for tat. So there's a lot been going on, and there's a lot of pressure being put on them, and they just lost it at the end now. But I think we can see more of the same, because the question really is there a plan B? Because we've got to assume they played a pretty good, hand of poker, as it were, or game of chess so far. So I've got to assume there's a plan B, but I think they were really expecting this to happen as well, because we had the Sol Foundation clearly set up to help the transition, talk to industry, talk to academic scientists. Then we had Danny Sheehan's thing, the Paradigm Institute, for the political side of it. So they're sort of setting up this infrastructure of disclosure, and it's been set back. So we're sort of in a bit of Wild West territory now, aren't we, or the unknown territory? And it was going to go in a quite easy way, or a controlled way, and now it could go the other way. That Sol Foundation, watching that, from what I can see, we haven't seen it yet, and we'll get onto that. But the main purpose of that, I think, was to get all these key opinion formers together in the UAP field. On the second day, they put the fear of God into them about what the consequences of an unplanned disclosure, economically, politically, sociologically. And they were really saying to people, we've got to be measured in what we disclose and how and the time. And that was a big thing coming forward. So they obviously thought that was, they were trying to prepare him to not take office, but to take over in the task. And it sort of didn't happen. So, I think we're at a real, at the tipping point, really, what's going to happen. But it could get very messy next year, which we'll get onto, I know. And I wonder what the plan B is, which we'll talk about. But it was fascinating to me, all this tit for tat stuff, as I say. And Kirkpatrick going as well. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, Kirkpatrick going is well, I guess it was right at the end of the year that he's going to be going up until. So I suppose he's kind of working out his last days then, eh? But that's
I think he's effectively gone now. But you're right, he was right up to the end of this because he said he was going to write the first chapter of the history. Didn't I hope he doesn't. Imagine that with his investigative powers, nothing happened.
I think that was Dave's best Christmas present for this year, wasn't it, Kirkpatrick?
Yeah, it was. Oh God, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm thinking I'll have to lighten up now on anybody else next after the roasting I used to give him. Well, well deserved.
That's true though, because that ties into a quite important point for what's going to happen going forward, which is to see what happens to Arrow. Because obviously nowadays we're all a bit grumpy about Arrow. We're all a bit sort of, not particularly looking at Arrow in terms of getting any great information. Although I know you appreciate the reports that they do, Ash, in terms of the sighting, the graphs and all the rest of it. It's kind of something that's your area, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But seeing what actually happens to the new director and how Arrow actually, what happens to that office moving forward is going to be an interesting one to see how that plays out. And I think that you'd also mentioned about the Lakatsky, obviously Dr. James Lakatsky, director of the completely verified US government UFO program. It kind of it amazes me really that we've basically got like an admittance there that what was it, like 15 years ago, the US government had a proper, full-fledged, funded UFO program. And I think sometimes that gets missed. The significance of Lakatsky actually saying that. Like, there's all this argument about Luis Elizondo, and there's all this argument about sort of like, what eight it was it a program, was it not, People get lost in those arguments so much. But the important thing really there is that ORSAP, was a proper US government UFO program. The director of that program has come out and spoke at length about what they did in that program. They did it for years. You know what I mean? It was funded. It was a significant sort of like amount of resources and capabilities and accesses that they had. And the director of that program, Lakatsky, this year came out and said, publicly via his book that was released, that the US indeed has a craft of non-human origin, which they were able to gain access to the interior of. And obviously we've not heard much more in terms of follow-up information on that, for good reason, because Lakatsky has said that he's going to try to get more information to be cleared by DOPSA for the future. And now I know that can be quite a long process, so whether or not we actually see that in 2024 is another question. But obviously Grusch is also trying to get further information cleared via DOPSA as well. So that's going to be interesting to see it play out. But yeah, for me, that was quite a big one, Lakatsky saying that. When you think about the significance of who it is that's saying it, and obviously I made quite a big deal with that on my pod at the time, talking about how he's basically the equivalent of Kirkpatrick. Can you imagine if Kirkpatrick said that? Do you know what I mean? If he came out and said, yeah, we've got a craft of non-human origin and we've gained access to the interior of it, it would have been a massive, wouldn't it? But it's crazy how just because he's the current director of a UFO, sort of investigative group within the US government, that attaches more weight. But Lakatsky was only doing it 15 years ago, and he said that really directly, really unambiguously. It's pretty wild to think, isn't it? But yeah, anything you wanted to add on that, Dave or Ash, about Lakatsky, and any other things that have happened this year that you want to touch on that I've not mentioned there?
I was going to say about the contrast between what Lakatsky's crew did, the ORSAP crew, and what Kirkpatrick did, because they were really trying. Lakatsky, in 2 years, they'd cracked a lot of stuff, and he did absolutely nothing, Kirkpatrick, in comparison. He was just trying to shut it down. And Arrow, if the act would have gone through, would have just been a sort of a subordinate, subservient, I should say, to the set up the review panel and all the rest of it, but they're going to set up around it, so it wouldn't have mattered so much. Arrow still is persisting, but we've seen it's being controlled. While it's controlled by the DOD and those people who've all got these conflicts of interest, I think we've got to worry about it. It all depends, if you remember, who takes control of it. And that was a big debate near the end of this year. Who gets control of it? And that'll be the big signal of who actually, which direction this is going in, really. So, yeah, I think there's been some brilliant articles from Chris Sharp as well. And I also think we've been very focused this year on the Grusch thing and the politics. But there's also been, and we won't get into it now, that when I was doing that original Ghost of Christmas Present thing again, so there's a few other areas. One that struck me was the international perspective and how much sightings have increased. And, you know, sightings around the world and what impact will that have? And the other thing was people didn't talk so much about abductions, but there was a big rise in talk about consciousness and what are the beings, and talk about the religious aspects of it and all the rest of it. So there has been quite a lot of other stuff developing around this in sort of the background, but we've been very focused on, for obvious reasons, on the fight, because the main battleground is obviously this politics. It's the key, as I consistently keep saying. It's the only way they're going to get the secrets out through. It's the only method of accountability or, you know, key they've got to get this stuff out. So we've focused on it, but there's been a lot of other things happening, particularly in terms of from what things I've read, the volume of sightings and all the rest of it has been quite significant around the world, you know, and people's reactions to them in different governments. So yeah, I think there's a few other things, and these might start coming to the fore this year as well. We don't know what's going to come out, do we? So it might be a bit more eclectic what we see in 2024, you know, in terms of topics, because this won't be the main focus, or maybe, I don't know, depending on the leaks.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Dave. I'm glad you mentioned that as well. Some of the wider kind of issues within the UFO topic, because as you say, we have been, you know, definitely, I and we on the podcast have been focused on, you know, the huge story of Grusch coming forward, and of course the comments by Lukatsky and what Arrow's up to and that kind of thing, because it's kind of quite a pressing concern, you know, something that's you know, unprecedented progress in terms of getting transparency from the government and whatnot. So obviously we focused on that, but certainly something I've been thinking about quite a bit, funnily enough, since I've been having a little bit of time off for Christmas as well, is, you know, what it must feel like to be somebody who, you know, has been abducted, or somebody who's had a profound sighting that's completely changed their life. And do you know what I mean? Like, because people don't just see something like that and then just crack on with day-to-day life as normal, do they? It's like it can have a huge impact on people, all around the world, of course, as well, not just the States. You know, people are having these kind of sightings and abduction experiences, and it is quite surprising that that's not really, even amongst the UFO community, it's not like a main area that people are looking at. But as you say, Dave, that may well, you know, change as we move along. But yeah, what do you reckon, Ash?
Yeah, on that point, with experiences and abduction cases, I speak to a lot of people who've had sightings, a lot of experiences throughout their life, and even just the one-off type of stuff. And kind of when they talk about sort of what's happened in the news, what's happened in America, sort of the most common kind of response I get when I ask them what they think of it is, I don't care what they say. I know what's real because it's happened to me. And they literally don't have any interest, or don't have much interest in what's happening, because to them, they say that we'll never hear the full truth from them, whereas they know the truth already. So you don't really pay much mind to it. And I guess for a lot of these people, they've had like a lifetime or years of ridicule from within the community as well about their experiences. And I guess it's just like a kind of, I don't really care what people think, whether it's the government, whether it's other people. I have my experience, and that's all I can go off. And Dave mentioned about sightings going up and stuff around the world. I've just been looking at the figures for this year, and there's a massive increase in August of reported sightings in the UK. Like literally double, like from July to August. I think whether that was kind of the height of it with Grusch and everything, maybe that's why we saw a big increase in August. Then kind of dropped down a little bit going into the autumn. Just kind of looking at the figures side of it. But I guess, yeah, we'll see.
Kirkpatrick brought that heat map out as well again, or he did it, you know, of sightings near US military facilities. And I think it might be that other countries are talking about it more, and there's more information being released as well. I mean, I go back to that thing in 22 where they said there was an exponential rise in sightings in the Senate Intelligence Committee. So there must be something to make them think that, and you get the impression there's more activity. around military stuff, but you also got the impression people are looking at it more as well. So, it's always it's hard to tell. But and if there is a rise, what does that mean? We've seen a rise in tension around the world. I don't want to get too woo about it, but we've seen a rise in tension around the world. We've seen a rise in activities. But if those two things are a correlation, then does that indicate that, again, there may be some event or whatever, or I don't know. But you know what I mean? Is there a correlation? Because that was one of the things I was asking myself when I was thinking about what had gone on this year. Interesting just to note, by the way, when you see that heat map that Kirkpatrick produced, Sharpie told me this, there's no sightings in Europe. Well, there was actually loads of sightings in Europe when I looked. But it's the US Air Force that handled that reporting, and surprise, surprise, they didn't report anything. There's a big gap. If you look at that map he did, Kirkpatrick, they have lots of military facilities on the ground in Europe, the Americans, but there's no sightings mentioned because the US Air Force are in charge of that mainly, I think. So there you go. Off the radar anyway and all that, yeah. So, whereas it was the Navy and the other bits. Anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack. The point is, reporting is very important. But generally speaking, that increase in sightings is very interesting. And we've got the thing about what is going to be this international response. We've still got the San Marino thing on the back burner, although I understand it's had a bit of a setback because there's been a bit of a regime change. Regime makes it sound like a military junta. They've had a change in administration in San Marino. So, but if that gets to the UN, it's again that thing about disclosure may become international, and what does that mean? And that was another thing. That's for me, the rise in sightings and talking about it was quite important as well, because that's where this may want to go. And I think that the people who want to see disclosure sort of prepared that ground quite carefully with the San Marino stuff. That wasn't by accident. I think there's a plan to take it to the UN in the end, and to have some sort of a talk about it. I mean, I've no evidence. I'm no other than circumstantial in my own analysis, which is just me. But I do think that's definitely a current we should keep our eye on in the next year.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see. Presumably, Ash, have you got a sighting report type thing coming out similar to what you did last year?
Yes, that's usually ready by the start to mid February, because we tend to give it a month after each month finishes just for sightings to kind of come in. We're up to mid-November with our data for this year. And, on the whole, do seem to be down on last year, like as a year. It was very, very quiet early in the year in terms of sightings being reported. So we probably will be down on last year, because last year was a big increase from 2021. It looks like it's come back down to kind of the same level this year. But yeah, the next month or month and a half, that would be I'll have that finished and published.
It's worth saying, Ash, it's a lot of graft, that, isn't it, mate, that you do. And, it's worth people realise it costs you a lot of time and some resource. So people should always try and support yourselves if they can. UFOs identified. I don't want to sound, I know you give me a $5 earlier to say that, but it really is a lot. I do admire all the work you do, because it's that sort of work. It's really important. How many times has that been cited, that work, or it's come up in the conversation? And if you hadn't been doing that, we'd have nowhere to go on the sightings. It might come up politically. It's important there. That is really important work to do, and the boots on the ground stuff you do as well. So important as basic evidence.
Nice one, yeah. Cheers, Dave.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll second that there with a little tip of the cap to you, Ash. It's and I think testament to the actual work that you do as well is how often it gets picked up as well by news channels and papers and stuff like that. And there was that. What was that article that you did recently as well that you were involved in?
Did the big article with GQ magazine, which was a really good article. There's also another kind of researchers around the UK looking at it. And this year we've featured in over 100 articles, TV shows, radio interviews. We just get all the time, like Dave, you both said, we're getting picked up all the time and publishing our data and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been
so
a good
important.
year.
Yeah, well deserved, mate, and fair play to you. Long may it continue. So I think that about wraps up where we've been. Where are we going is the next question. What are we likely to see as we move along? Of course, Dave, you mentioned about Gary Nolan's Soul Foundation held its first proper event this year. with involvement, of course, from Man of the Year, as we've now crowned him, Dave Grusch, and the Soul Foundation are bringing together scientists, academics, and experts, and kind of really getting some interesting conversations going. It's going to be interesting just in general to see what the Soul Foundation do as they move along. Of course, that particular event was invite only, but we can expect to see the actual talks from that, from the various guests, to be released on online. I'm not exactly sure. I was going to say YouTube, but I'm not sure. But the videos are planned for release in early January. I am reliably informed. And also upcoming is an op-ed, essentially like an article, opinion piece from Dave Grusch, which I think, fair to say, is partly in reaction to the gutting of the legislation. Grusch himself described that as one of the worst failures in the history of the United States Congress. Didn't mince his words on that one. But what will that opinion piece actually contain? I've been racking my brains about that. It's an interesting thought, because he's not going to be able to talk about anything he's not had cleared. Presumably the concept of it being an opinion piece is that he can give an opinion perhaps on certain things, like come a bit closer to a line of, you know what I mean, without crossing the line sort of thing. If he said, I know from my experience that this is there and this is there, you can't say that without clearance from DOPSA. But do you think there's perhaps room, Dave, for Dave Grusch to express some opinions without perhaps going into any sticky territory? What do you reckon, Dave?
Well, I think he's had a pattern of clearing things more through DOPSA, more detail, so I presume that's what he's going to do. I think he's pushing it as well, because this legal issue, he's sort of saying, if you don't let me say what I'm going to say, well, I'm going to take you to court. So I think he's really pushing him. So if you think about what he has talked about, apart from, I know I've said it a couple of times over this last year, but he's talked about the existence of non-human intelligence, possession of bodies and craft. We've got materials, treaties, which I still blows my head off to think about that. Some hostile action they've done, reverse engineering programs since the war, cult arms race with other nations, big internal cover-up, misappropriate. So I think if he just talks about more of them things, it just depends what's the button to press with everybody. And more generally, I think with the Grusch thing, well, let's go. I'll stop on Grusch for the moment. I don't know what Ash thinks about that, what he might say. I want to come back on some of the wider stuff about leaks as well. So I've got some ideas what that might cover.
Soul Foundation, don't really know. Not really been keeping up to speed on that one. I saw a podcast back regarding the whistleblowers. But the thought I kind of had on that, what I touched on before with the legislation being quashed, is that could either cause people not coming forward because of obviously what's happened to Grusch and all that stuff happening. Then because it has been quashed, whether that will cause people to come forward, because they're thinking, okay, they're not going to do it this way. We're going to have to do it, kind of leaking stuff out rather than doing it properly. So we kind of got two thoughts over whether it would cause more or cause less. So I think that would be sort of interesting to see coming into next year.
Well, to pick it up then, if we are going to see those leaks, I've been thinking what possible leaks might we see, because I think you're right, Ash, it's a good point. Because it's a bit of a risk. I mean, I've been talking to Frank about it. It's a bit of a risk if you come forward, and maybe you can address this when you come back in, Frank, because if you're not doing it under the umbrella of the proper process like Grusch has done, you're risking a lot, So, but equally, we keep hearing, right, well, if you're going to do it, if you're going to be like that, we're going to start leaking. And so on the one hand, I thought what could happen, and this maybe goes to the Grusch piece as well. It might be who the contacts have been with what sort of contacts have they had, what communication have they had, sort of people, their beings in captivity, detail of what's been recovered, when, where, actual sites, confirmation of all the big cases we've heard of. Might be some kind of footage, might even be footage of a meeting interview. I mean, I'm just speculating here, by the way, just to give you the flavour. Could be a load of tracking data coming out. Might be some evidence of people who've been bumped off, clear evidence of that. Might be evidence of misappropriation of funds as well. Might be information on the sort of races, categories, or whatever you call different species is probably a better phrase, alien sort of species. and what the categories are. I mean, crucially, all these things are going to need provenance or they're not worth much. So even though that's the other interesting thing, but I heard Danny Sheehan last night on the Thomas Fessler show, Disclosure Tonight, and he was saying that if we don't hear anything, he's going to start doing, because he's got all set up investigative people like he did in other legal cases where they're going to go out and interview people. He's thinking of doing it a court of human opinion approach or public opinion approach, so they might stream testimony from experts, get people in, ask them questions, release the research stuff they've been doing, so they might just do their own DIY disclosure based on other things. Could be a lot of stuff happening, people coming out. It might be influential people coming out saying, yes, I was involved. I don't know how the leaks are, because there's a number of ways they could go. But I think that probably the safest way to go is to talk in generalities and just try and avoid the very secret specifics that you can get done for, as it were. And that's what we don't know, where that line is, if you see what I mean, where what you can and can't say. And that's what Grusch is pushing. So I think it could, my sense is that they're not going to take it lying down. They're going to go, because if they don't do it now in the next year or something, it could all sort of die off again. I don't think it'll die off completely. I don't think the toothpaste can be put back in the tube to that extent. But I do think it could die off a little bit. So I think, having played the card, started the game, as it were, they need to try and finish it. And so I think the balance of probabilities is going to be a lot more leaks, because they're talking about, it's going to be quite significant, but it's got to have a shock factor and it's got to convince people. That's the key thing. It's got to have some sort of key provenance, and that's the difficulty. But yeah, so I think, that'll do that. Sorry, Frank, I thought you probably wanted to come back in there.
Hey, no, you're all right, Dave. No need to apologise. But yeah, just to pick up on that you were talking about there is earlier on as well, the treaties thing, again, is absolutely mind-boggling, isn't it? And, I sort of described that as being what I consider to be on slightly more shaky ground in terms of being able to verify it and that kind of thing. But, at the end of the day, I've already sort of gone on and on about Grusch and how his background's impeccable and that kind of thing, and he's done his research on these people that he's interviewed, and if he's come to the conclusion that, the treaties may be something that has taken place, it's really interesting to think, and, are we going to perhaps see anything in his op-ed about that? That'll be one to keep an eye on, and certainly how it develops over time as well. But yeah, do you know what you were saying, Ash, about, people who are already thinking about coming forward might get put off and that kind of thing, and potentially, or could it be, new people might be inspired, to come forward after seeing the nature of the pushback against Grusch and that kind of thing? I think you probably, it could be quite likely we could see both of those things happening. People who are already thinking about coming forward may well see what's happened and think, actually, do you know what, I'm not going to bother. Not that I'm not going to bother, but, it's not worth the repercussions and that kind of thing. Every situation probably would be, quite different, wouldn't it? Like somebody in one situation might think that, somebody who's in a different part of, a different phase of their life and career might look at it slightly differently, depending on, where they were up to. But it certainly could have an effect on both of those sides. But I was speaking to Matt Ford from the Good Trouble show. I think it was last week or the week before. Anyway, quite recently, he was on the Christmas episode as the Ghost of Christmas Future, and he made a really good point about leaks, which is it's very unlikely that anybody who's already got a protected disclosure, i.e. any of the people that Grusch has interviewed, they're very unlikely to leak anything, because or at least they're very unlikely to leak anything that is contained within their protected disclosure that they've already given, in terms of giving information to the Inspector General or to Congress or whatever it might be, or to Arrow. Because if they come out with very specific information as a leak and don't put their own name on it just because they want to get it out into the public eye, obviously the Inspector General or Arrow, whoever it's got that protected disclosure, they're going to know that it's come from that person if it's specific information. So they're very unlikely to go down that path. I think if they're already in the system, as it were, they're probably not going to leak anything. However, people who aren't already in the system, the people who perhaps didn't have anything already ongoing in the pipeline, if they see all of the events of the last year and they're inspired to come forward, but they think, actually, do you know what? After seeing what's happened to Grusch, after seeing how Arrow have treated the people who've actually gone forward. I'm not going to go through those legal channels. I am going to leak something. I think that's probably the scenario where we'd be most likely to see an actual, proper leak kind of thing, rather than just somebody going forward and pulling the whistle, or blowing the whistle even. But yeah, it's. I think that's probably a really good point there of what we might see in terms of leaks. What do you reckon, Dave?
Well, I think that's made me think that when Matt said that as well. Yeah, that is true. I mean, there is a lot of talk of another event as well. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk of that, and Lou said something you might not think of, but other people have said there's something else happening. It doesn't sound like a Grusch type thing, or a classic whistleblower thing that we're looking at. And I think that's a good point. They don't want to sort of, mess up their own sort of testimony, do they, or approach they've spent ages on. So I don't know what that could be, but I get the impression it could be some big revelation, yeah? We've still got that guy who said he was trained up as a kid, by the Air Force. And that he's bringing this book out. There's that to come out, which everybody's talking about, but... yeah, so I think there could be something else in the works as well. I mean, we've got Lou's book to come. Apparently, Lou's doing a documentary as well. We've got James Fox doing a documentary. We might also see some new legislation as well. I mean, trying to do it again, or even Biden might even go, all right, well, I don't think he's going to do this, but, do the act anyway, because he could do it. Anyway, getting back to the leaks, I think it will be something a bit different or parallel, yeah? And it'd be very interesting to see what that is. Yeah, so I sort of agree with both, but I'm really struggling to think what this other event could be. Because in the past, when the government have thought about disclosure, from my reading on it, they thought of doing like a public event, like, a display or some sort of show, where they'd have some alien bodies on show, craft, and like a run by NASA or NOAA or somebody, where it's a bit of an exhibition they take round. So whether it's something like that, I don't know. Or whether Danny Sheehan's the way forward, where they do their own investigation, but it's more verified. I don't know. It's a real head scratcher, Frank, what it's going to be, because people. So maybe it's this generalities thing, and so I don't know. But I think this other event might be quite key. And I think Lou's book is definitely going to coordinate with something else, and it might be that. So yeah, that's where I am with it.
So where's that coming from? I haven't heard about that. The other event, is that something Danny Sheehan's been talking about?
Yeah. To be honest, I haven't looked up before we come on, but it's things. A few people have mentioned it in pods and shows who are quite credible. I'm sorry, I can't remember who they are now, but it's like saying, well, something else is going to be. I mean, there's a guy, Exo Academia, and he's mentioned it. A couple of people on his shows. Nathan mentioned it as well, who we know from CAB. But I've just heard people, James Fox made some sort of mention of it. And it's just been in the air of people, when I've heard it being talked about, I thought, well, these people have got something about them, And the impression I get is it's some sort of publicity or something they're going to reveal that isn't what Grusch has been talking about, or Grusch related or whistleblower related as such. So I get the impression it's going to be something more about an event, or, some sort of happening or sighting or evidence to something like that. So that's what I get, Frank, but I'm not sure. It could equally be a book and some revelations by somebody else. Or it might be, I don't know, a Grusch Mark II, I suppose, somebody else coming forward who's worked on the craft. So I'm sorry I'm a bit vague, but next time we speak, I'll chase it down a bit. But it's something I've definitely heard from people who I would normally listen to. It's some sort of parallel event, I get the impression of. It's not some ET event or anything like that, or any government event. It's sort of a planned, something that the team disclosure are going to do, or somebody's going to do. But I hope that, I don't know whether that makes it any clearer at all, really. But at least I've fleshed it out what I've heard, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's interesting to hear about what is the word on the grapevine, as it were. I think it's funny you mentioned this earlier, Dave. I know we'd spoke about it a bit over the last few days. It struck me when I was listening back to that show we did at the end of 2023. It seemed like there was a really clear direction where we were going. We'd heard about this whistleblower who's coming forward. The legislation was like, people talk about it as the disclosure train. It was full steam ahead, at that stage in time. And we've hit a bit of a snag over the last month or so. Yeah. And it really isn't the same clear path forward. I don't think we're currently waiting for what's actually going to happen. But also, very interestingly as well, there's a lot of you just mentioned it as like parallel things that are going on as well. I think there's quite a lot of niche aspects within the UFO topic, like the consciousness thing, and even studies into DMT and psilocybin and things like that are going on around the world. And that the nature of reality itself is been questioned for some time, and there's a lot of interesting studies into that and how that might intersect with the UFO stuff. Also, just technology, AI. That's something I've been mentioning for quite some time now, is that as AI continues to develop, what's that going to do in terms of, Ash, it'd be like your dream. Imagine like all of the sighting reports from around the world analysed and collated into a report by AI. At the moment, it'd probably be a bit, higgledy-piggledy, and there'd be all sorts of weird things going on in there because AI is not...
Save me a lot of time.
Well, that's it. But you know what AI is like? A couple of years ago, ChatGPT was like really clumsy, and you could hardly get a proper response out of it without it talking about something completely random, and punctuation in the wrong places and stuff like that. In the early days, might have been more than a couple of years ago, but nowadays it's absolutely amazing what can be done, and it's advancing so rapidly. We hear about that. What is it? The David Miller's thing called the National UFO Record Center. David Miller was putting this massive database together, and he's kind of inheriting databases of huge filing cabinets of reports from all these other researchers. I think we've talked about it before. Philip Mantle has donated all of his files to him, and a database like that, if it could be digitized and AI was able to actually scan through it and pick out trends and generate reports from it and that kind of thing, it could change the game, really. It could really give some different insights. And funnily enough, that's exactly what Jacques Vallée was attempting to do with the ORSAP database. Yeah. That was his key involvement, and that shows how ahead of the curve Vallée's thinking, I suppose, it is and was, because he was talking about doing this nearly 20 years ago. It's but now, with how good AI is, back then you'd have probably needed a computer the size of a room to do that. But now, obviously, AI is becoming unbelievably capable and more accessible to everybody. And fascinating to think how that's going to, affect the UFO side of things. And of course, that human angle as well, like we talked about earlier on. I think I'm definitely, guilty, as it were, of focusing on the progress on the political side and being excited about what the tech's like, etc. But the reality is, if we really are being visited by non-human intelligences, the sightings and more to the point, those abductions that people have reported for decades, they take on a bit more of a somber tone. If it's people are reporting being taken from their homes against their will and had some terrifying experiences, and as this topic moves along, if we start to see some kind of official or semi-official acknowledgement from like world powers, I think we'd look back on certain people's accounts and experiences in a new light. Same thing, actually, you could say about the nature of reality, the consciousness and all that kind of thing. As that progresses, how is that going to affect how we look back at people's individual experiences? And, there's also the thing of the people who claim to be able to interact with the phenomenon, CE5, HICE, basically the practice of focusing your mind to be able to contact with a non-human intelligence. And it's been going on, this whole time. I've spoke about it years ago on the show, but not really been into that angle much recently because of what other things that have been going on. But I've seen videos of, to be fair, I've seen a lot of videos of satellites and meteors and Starlink, from some of that crowd. But having said that, though, I've seen very interesting videos as well of things doing right angle turns and, so things that genuinely don't seem right. And how's that angle going to progress, going forward? It's a lot to keep an eye on, isn't there, Ash? What do you reckon?
Yeah, because, I'm not sure I've mentioned this on a round table or not previously, but I gave a talk in Wales in October, which was one of my highlights of the year. And one of the questions at the end, we did a Q&A. Someone in the audience asked, so if we do get the truth, we get disclosure, kind of what would that mean for you and your work and stuff? And my answer was kind of, well, it's not going to change what we do. We do our events, we do our support, we give places where people who've had experiences can go. And that whether we get the truth or not these people still had experiences. These people still need support. They still need people that they know they can go to and talk to. We've had people come to us that have kept their story secret for 30 years. And the first time they told anyone in 30 years is at one of our meetings or just to me. And that's kind of why we do it, to give people that place to go. And like I say, in sort of the whole furore and flurry of everything happening kind of officially and in America and the UK, do they, don't they, all this stuff. When it comes down to the bottom line for what we do, it's about the people. It's about the community. And these people that had nowhere to go, that have been ridiculed their whole life, that have felt scared, people that have got trauma, got PTSD because of their experiences, they're still going to need somewhere to go to have that support in place. Whether it might make it easier to give that support, whether there can be somewhere like, obviously there's charities and stuff coming out now that are looking at how to kind of support people, and whether it would increase that side of it, which would be good. But like for us, it's about the people. It's about people that had experiences. That's why with UFO Identify, we look at the sightings, the experiences, the reports. We go out and meet these people. We go out and meet witnesses, experiences. We put events on, we put meetings on so people can come and have somewhere to go. And that's what it kind of will always be for us. And whatever happens kind of in America, that's always going to be the bottom line for what we do, which is, for me, the most important kind of part of it in that sense. That's
very obvious. Some of the meetings I've been to, a lot of the people who we've spoke to, the ones in Manchester have been to mainly, people are talking about their experiences. There's nowhere else they could have gone to talk about that and have people listen, and we've had some really good chats there with people. And people would be laughed at, but, if they wouldn't, you can't guarantee that. But yeah, you wouldn't have been able to have that conversation, but it's really important. And the normal people, and I think because you're rooted on the ground, grassroots stuff and boots on the ground, I think it's always, you're at the source effectively, aren't you? And it's sort of, it always has that sort of mission. I mean, as you weren't saying this, I know it's not mutually exclusive. You can still have the analysis and all the rest of it. But yeah, that is really important. And how many people quote stuff, going back to your report and other things and other people on the ground, that's sort of the ammunition, the fuel, isn't it, that keeps things going, as well as providing that vital support as well. Could I just go back to something else just quickly, Frank? I know we're just on in terms of I would know in terms of what's happened. They always say, don't they, the first casualty of battle is the battle plan. And I think that's a bit of what's happened. As the forces have joined after the speech, the battle plan's gone out of the window a little bit. So I think we're seeing what's going to happen next, and everybody's sort of squaring up to each other in terms of what's going to happen with the leaks. And I do think they plan for it a little bit. On the AI front, there was a great interview with James Iron Doley with a guy, I forget his name now, it's gone from my mind, but he was, him and his dad did a lot of work on it. It was a recent interview doing evidence, crash retrieval evidence and document stuff. And he's done a book on, I'll tell Frank, he can put it in the notes later what the book is and the person's name. Whereas AI and UAP, I ordered it for them, should be coming tomorrow. And he asked this new AI now a lot of quite sophisticated questions about the trends, what's going on and what does it mean. It sounds fascinating, some of the answers. So AI, I think is going to have a massive impact. It's just about trend spotting, thinking in ways maybe humans can't, and just being across all that data. Some of it would take a human being or even a team of people, maybe years or months, that can do very, very quickly. And that's really, really going to help us, I think. And I think if you're doing both, then asking the next set of questions. So I think I think you're right, Frank, it's going to be very powerful. And on the sort of the racist thing, the consciousness thing, I think it's quite important to think about how that might look in terms of what the nature of the beings are. I mean, because there's two possibilities potentially. One, that it's all interdimensional and the different consciousnesses. I don't think there's two. I'm going to come back to I don't think there's two. But there's the consciousness are coming in, they're having this impact, and they're very different entities to us coming from a different dimension because of the nature of consciousness and reality. Or it's people who've got technology who sort of understand how the universe works, the properties of consciousness and time, and they're able to manipulate it like that slide 9 stuff and just manipulate. So you've either got somebody in our dimension who can manipulate their deeper understanding of the universe, or you've got very different entities that are coming through and the sort of stuff that you do with a lot on your podcast, a paranormal podcast. And I've come to think it's looking at it quite deeply as it's sort of both. Because I think this year has shown, listening to the people talking, a lot of the craft and stuff they're talking about have got an extraterrestrial origin. Most of the people seem to think that who are dealing with it. But I still think there's a lot of evidence of other things as well that we see all the time. So I think what we're seeing is a much more sophisticated and detailed setup about the type of entities that we're dealing with. And that to me is what's come across. It made me think about it. And I think this thing about consciousness is going to be really, really important because there's also a lot of religious ideas in there. And I was on Cab the other night, Colin Bean's podcast talking about this. Because there's a lot of religious ideas, there's a lot of philosophy more than you think about, because they deal with these sort of issues about spirit and spirits and, you know, different types of ideas. And it's very easy to jump very quickly into a sort of religious philosophy to explain things and get down that path when it could be something else. But it's really, really, it's a real melting pot at the moment about what does it mean. And with people saying, oh, it's all in your mind, there's no reality, and other people saying it's all nuts and bolts. I think we're seeing a much more sophisticated mix, and it's in that sophistication where all these different things are happening. And that's why I think it's interesting with what you're doing a lot, Ash, in your paranormal stuff, you know, on that podcast and the UAP stuff. That's why it's coming together a lot more, because there's a natural connection of this whole thing and what it means in one way or the other. So it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a lot of areas to keep an eye on. And a lot of those other areas outside of specifically UAP as well, UFOs, like, you know, just to be fair, just general politics. Like whoever gets elected in the States is going to make a huge difference to this. The way some of these global conflicts play out is going to make a difference to all of this as well. Obviously, as we mentioned, studies into consciousness and all that kind of thing as well. And one that I meant to mention earlier is some of these studies into ancient civilizations as well. Something that, you know, I know me and you talk about quite a bit, Dave, off the podcast. You know, there's quite a lot of advances in scientific analysis of ancient artifacts, and you know, seem to be pointing towards the existence of a much more advanced technology than what we thought. In terms of the precision of ancient Egyptian vases and some of the statues and structures and things like that, stuff that's, I mean, because that, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. Ancient aliens has kind of really created a stigma around all that sort of stuff. As soon as you mention anything to do with Egypt and advanced technology, people assume that you mean like, oh, the aliens built the pyramids. But, you know, it's not necessarily that simple. There could be some kind of common thread that perhaps an ancient civilization who existed on this planet be using some kind of technology that taps into something about the universe that we haven't quite grasped yet. And perhaps, you know, if there is non-human intelligence visiting the planet, maybe they use that same kind of aspect of reality to fuel, you know, the way that they do things. Not literally fuel it, but you know what I mean? Like there could be some things that they understand about reality that they can use technology in a way that we haven't figured out yet. And perhaps if there was an ancient civilization on this planet before that got wiped out or whatever, you know, maybe they had figured out some aspects of that. It's very interesting to think about how all of these separate branches are all kind of progressing and how they might start to cross over. But I think in terms of, as I was saying, last year's Festive Round Table, we had a very clear idea of what was going to happen. This year's a bit feel like stepping into the great unknown in a way. The two concrete predictions I would have is that we're going to see those videos from the Soul Foundation in January and Dave Grusch's op-ed. Obviously, there's various other bits as well, like we could see Lou Elizondo's book. We could see further things from Lukatsky. You know, there's going to be, you mentioned James Fox earlier, his film's going to be coming out, I think he said early summer. Whether that remains on schedule, I don't know. So there's going to be some interesting bits and pieces coming out along the way as well. But I'm just excited to see how it all plays out, really. And I think, as we said last year, it'll be interesting to come back to, you know, to this kind of conversation this time next year And what are we going to be saying? Because, like, obviously this year we're saying, wow, what a roller coaster this year's been. Is it going to be even more of a roller coaster in the next year? Is it going to be a bit of a damp squib? You know, we're just going to have to wait and see, aren't we? But anyone want to add anything before we wrap it up?
I just feel like Corbell has got his button on publish, his finger on publish, ready for something to. He seems to have been quiet recently. I think he's primed for something that's just a little prediction in the next probably month or so.
Well,
something from him.
I think you're right, Ash. I think that I think I was something to do with this other thing. I think it's going to be something like to carry on the box of some massive uppercut that they're going to deliver. But it's very hard for the establishment to deny, and that's what I think we might see. That's a bit of a bold prediction, I suppose, but that's what I think we might see, as well as some other stuff around the edges, something quite big that's obviously got some good provenance, that's very hard to deny with people coming forward, because I think they've got to sort of do that in a way now to keep the ball rolling, and not, because I think the forces of non-disclosure really are hanging on by the fingertips now. They've shown their hand by deliberately blocking that thing in Congress, the acts, and it's because I think they've sort of been come out into the open, as it were. And I think that maybe I'm being optimistic. I don't want to be too optimistic, but I do think that's what we're going to see. The other thing you touched on, Frank, is that I think we really need to realise the deteriorating situation in American politics and the backdrop of the election this year. And that may be that it may have we won't be able to say it'll have a weird interplay on the topic. It may be that it's promoted, or it may be that it's pushed back, but there could be some weird politics. They always have something called the October surprise in American elections. And that's when something just before the date of the election in November comes out. It was Hillary Clinton, if you remember that, with that FBI guy saying she'd hacked, I forget what it was. People could see her emails. There's always something happens, some revelation, where they try and destabilise the result of the election. So there could be something around UAPs then. But if this Grusch thing comes out and there is a big event, then Biden might use it as some sort of tool, or he might not. So, but that backs about the situation in America is also, I think, very serious internally, in terms of the factions, the lack of this very extreme different size, the difference is very, very adversarial. And I think it's in some ways the society, not the society, but the political system is quite destabilized at the moment. And so that might play into things as well, the sort of internal politics in a way we can't quite predict yet. But yeah, I think it is going to be quite a wild ride, as you sort of implying, really. And I'm very interesting to see where we go. But if anything comes out about treaties, I think it's any proof. I think it's sort of game over, really. The only other thing, I suppose, is the question: has Grusch's revelation sped things up in terms of what adversary nations, and what they reveal? And also, and this is much more of a wild speculation, what the others might do as well. Yeah, we don't know. So that's more of a wild, that last one. But yeah, I think it's absolute. I think the uppercut is the one I would say something big's going to come out. I think they need to do something like that tactically. And then the Soul Foundation and all them can move in and maybe pick the pieces up. I don't know.
Well, we'll certainly see what we can come back to from these predictions and whatnot on the end of January roundtable. We'll see what we've got to talk about on that one, eh? And obviously, as the year moves along as well, by the time we get to this time next year, I'll be interested to come back to see what we predicted and what actually happened and whatnot. But I think we'll leave it there then for tonight. So pleasure as always. Cheers, guys.
Nice one. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, cheers, Frank. It's great to talk to you, and I really enjoyed that. And it's talking about it, even just articulating it, makes it, you see all the different possibilities. So I really enjoyed that chat. I'll be thinking about it as well over the coming days.
Indeed. Well, yeah, have a good New Year. And if anyone's listening to this, it may already be New Year by the time you listen. So Happy New Year and all the best for 2024 to everybody. Yeah. All right.
Happy New Year, everybody.
UFO Round Table. The UFO Thinker and Pursuit of the Paranormal podcasts.